The Hobbit by J.R.R. Tolkien, Chapter 12, Inside Information, Part 1. For a long time, the dwarf stood in the dark before the door and debated, until at last Thorin spoke. Now is the time for our esteemed Mr. Baggins, who has proved himself a good companion on our long road and a habit full of courage and resource, far exceeding his size, and if I may say so, possessed of good luck far exceeding the usual allowance. Now is the time for him to perform the service for which he was included in our company. Now is the time for him to earn his reward. You are familiar with Thorin's style on important occasions, so I will not give you any more of it, though he went on a good deal longer than this. It certainly was an important occasion, but Bilbo felt impatient. By now he was quite familiar with Thorin too, and he knew that what he was driving at. If you mean you think it is my job to go into the secret passage first, O Thorin, Thrain's son, Oakenshield, may your beard grow even longer, he said crossly. Say so at once and have done. I might refuse. I have got you out of too many messes already, which were hardly in the original bargain, so that I am, I think, already owed some reward. But third time pays for all, as my father used to say, and somehow I don't think I shall refuse. Perhaps I have begun to trust my luck more than I used to in the old days. He meant last spring before he left his own house, but it seemed centuries ago. But anyway, I think I will go and have a peep at once and get it over. Now, who is coming with me? He did not expect a chorus of volunteers, so he was not disappointed. Philly and Killy looked uncomfortable and stood on one leg, but the others made no pretense of offering except for Balin, the lookout man who was rather fond of the hobbit. He said he would come inside at least, and perhaps a bit of a way too, ready to call for help if necessary. The most that can be said for the dwarfs is this. They intended to pay Bilbo really handsomely for his services. They had bought him to do a nasty job for them, and they did not mind the poor little fellow doing it if he would. But they would all have done their best to get him out of a trouble if he got into it, as they did in the case of the trolls at the beginning of their adventures before they had any particular reasons for being grateful to him. There it is. Dwarfs are not heroes, but calculating folk with a great idea of value of money. Some are tricky and treacherous and pretty bad lots. Some are not, but are decent enough people like Thorin and company if you don't expect too much. The stars were coming out behind him in a pale sky, barred with black, when the hobbit crept through the enchanted door and stole into the mountain. It was far easier going than he expected. This was no goblin entrance or rough wood elf's cave. It was a passage made by dwarfs at the height of their wealth and skill, straight as a ruler, smooth floored and smooth sided, going with a gentle, never varying slope, direct to some distant end in the blackness below. After a while, Balin bade Bilbo good luck and stopped where he could see the faint outline of the door, and by the trick of echoes of the tunnel hear the rustle of whispering voices of the others just outside. Then the hobbit slipped on his ring, and warned by the echoes to take more than hobbits care to make no sound. He crept noiselessly down, down, down into the dark. He was trembling with fear, but his little face was set and grim. Already he was a very different hobbit from the one that had run out without a pocket handkerchief from Bag End long ago. He had not had a pocket handkerchief for ages. He loosened his dagger in his sheath, tightened his belt, and went on. Now you are in for it at last, Bilbo Baggins, he said to himself. You went and put your foot right in that night of the party, and now you have got to pull it out and pay for it. Dear me, what a fool I was and am, said the least tookish part of him. I have absolutely no use for dragon guarded treasures, and the whole lot could stay here forever if only I could wake up and find this beastly tunnel was my own front hall at home. He did not wake up, of course, but went still on, till all sign of the door behind had faded away. He was altogether alone. Soon he thought it was beginning to feel warm. Is that a kind of glow I seem to see coming right ahead down there? He thought. It was. As he went forward, it grew and grew, till there was no doubt about it. It was a red light, steadily getting redder and redder. Also, it was now undoubtedly hot in the tunnel. Wisps of vapor floated up and past him, and he began to sweat. A sound, too, began to throb in his ears, a sort of bubbling like the noise of large pot galloping on the fire, mixed with a rumble as the gigantic tomcat purring. This grew to unmistakably gurgling noise of some vast animal snoring in its sleep down there in the red glow in front of him. It was at this point that Bilbo stopped. Going on from there was the bravest thing he ever did. The tremendous thing that happened afterwards were as nothing compared to it. He fought the real battle in the tunnel alone before he ever saw the vast danger that lay in wait. At any rate, after a short halt, go on, he did, and you can picture him coming to the end of the tunnel, an opening of much the same size and shape as the door above. Though it peeps the hobbit little head, through it peeps a hobbit's little head. Before him lies the great bottommost cellar, or the dungeon hall of the ancient dwarfs, right at the mountain's root. It is almost dark, so that its vastness can only be dimly guessed. But rising from the near side of the rocky floor, there is a great glow, the glow of smoke. There he lay, a vast red golden dragon, fast asleep. A thrumping came from his jaws and nostrils, and wisps of smoke, but his fires were low in slumber. Beneath him, under all his limbs and his huge coiled tail, and about him on all sides stretching away across unseen floors, lay countless piles of precious things, gold wrought and unwrought, gems and jewels, and silver red stained in ruddy light. Smug lay with wings folded like an immeasurable bat, turned partly on one side so that the hobbit could see his underparts and his long pale belly crusted with gems and fragments of gold from his long lying on his costly bed. Behind him, where the walls were nearest, could dimly be seen coats of mail, helms and axes, swords and spears hanging, and there in rows stood great jars and vessels filled with a wealth that could not be guessed. To say that Bilbo's breath was taken away is no description at all. There are no words left to express his staggerment, since men changed the language that they learned of elves in the days when all the world was wonderful. Bilbo had heard tell of sing of dragon horse before, but the splendor, the lust, the glory of such treasure had never yet come home to him. His heart was filled and pierced with enchantment and with the desire of dwarfs, and he gazed motionless, almost forgetting the frightful guardian at the gold beyond price and count. He gazed for what seemed an age, before, drawn almost against his will, he stole from the shadow of the doorway across the floor to the nearest edge of the mounds of treasure. Above him, the sleeping dragon lay, a dire menace even in his sleep. He grasped a great two-handed cup, as heavy as he could carry, and cast one fearful eye upwards. Smug steered a wing, opened a claw. The rumble of his snoring changed its note. Then Bilbo fled, but the dragon did not wake, not yet, but shifted into other dreams of greed and violence, lying there in his stolen hall while the little hobbit toiled back up the long tunnel. His heart was beating, and a more fevered shaking was in his legs than when he was going down. But still he clutched the cup, and his chief thought was, I have done it. This will show them. More like a grocer than a burglar indeed. Well, we will hear no more of that. Nor did he. Balin was overjoyed to see the hobbit again, and as delighted as he was surprised, he picked Bilbo up and carried him out into open air. It was midnight, and clouds had covered the stars, but Bilbo lay with his eyes shut, gasping and taking pleasure in the feel of the fresh air again, and hardly noticing the excitement of the dwarfs, or how they praised him and patted him on the back and put themselves and all their families for generations to come at his service. The dwarfs were still passing the cup from hand to hand and talking delightedly of the recovery of their treasure, when suddenly a vast rumbling woke in the mountain underneath, as if it was an old volcano that had made up its mind to start eruptions again. The door behind them was pulled near to and blocked from closing with a stone, but up the long tunnel came the dreadful echoes from far down in the depths of billowing and a trampling that made the ground beneath them tremble. The dwarfs forgot their joy and their confident boost of movement before and crowded and cowered down in fright. Smug was still to be reckoned with. It does not do to leave a live dragon out of your calculations if you live near him. Dragons may not have much real use for all their wealth, but they know it to an ounce as a rule, especially after a long possession. And Smug was no exception. He had passed from an uneasy dream in which a warrior altogether insignificant in size but provided with a bitter sword and a great courage, figured most unpleasantly to a doze, and from doze to wide waking. There was a breath of strange air in his cave. Could there be a draught from the little hole? He had never felt quite happy about it, though it was so small, and now he glared at it in suspicion and wondered why he had never blocked it up. Of late he had half fancied he had caught the dim echoes of a knocking sound from far above that came down through it to his lair. He stirred and stretched forth his neck to sniff. Then he missed the cup. Thieves, fire, murder. Such a thing had not happened since first he came to the mountain. His rage passed description, the sort of rage that is only seen when rich folk that have more than they can enjoy suddenly lose something that they have long had but have never before used or wanted. His fire belched forth. The hall smoked. He shook the mountain roots. He thrust his head in vain at a little hole, and then, coiling in length together, roaring like thunder underground, he sped from his deep lair through its great door out into huge passage of the mountain palace and up towards the front gate. To hunt the whole mountain till he had caught the thief and had torn and trampled him was his one thought. He issued from the gate, the waters rose in fierce whistling stream, and up he soared, blazing into air, and settled on the mountain top, in a spout of green and scarlet flame. The dwarfs heard the awful rumor of his flight, and they crouched against the wall of the grassy terrace, cringing under boulders, hoping somehow to escape the frightful eyes of hunting dragon. There they would have all been killed if it had not been for Bilbo once again. Quick, quick, he gasped. The door, the tunnel, it's no good here. Roused by those words, they were just about to creep inside the tunnel when Bifur gave a cry. My cousins, Bombur and Bofur, we have forgotten them. They are down in the valley. They will be slain, and all their ponies too, and all our stores lost, moaned the others. We can do nothing. Nonsense, said Thorin, recovering his dignity. We cannot leave them. Get inside, Mr. Baggins and Balin, and you too, Philly and Killy. The draggers shall not have all of us. Now, you others, where are the ropes? Be quick. Those were perhaps the worst moments they had been through yet. The horrible sound of Smaug's anger were echoing in the stony hollows far above them. At any moment he might come blazing down or fly whirling round and find them there, near the perilous cliff edge, hauling madly on the ropes. Up came Bofur, and still all was safe. Up came Bombur, puffing and blowing while the ropes creaked, and still all was safe. Up came some tools and bundles of stores, and the dragon was upon them. He would not forget or forgive the theft, not if 1,000 years turned him into smoldering stone, but he could afford to wait. Slow and silent, he crept back to his lair and half closed his eyes. When morning came, the terror of dwarfs grew less. They realized that dangers of this kind were inevitable in dealing with such a guardian, and that it was no good giving up their quest yet. Nor could they get away just now, as Thorin had pointed out. Their ponies were lost or killed, and they would have to wait some time before Smug relaxed his watch sufficiently for them to dare the long way on foot. Luckily, they had saved enough of their stores to last them still for some time. They debated long on what was to be done, but they could think of no way of getting rid of Smug, which had always been a weak point in their plans, as Bilbo felt inclined to point out. Then, as is the nature of folk that are thoroughly perplexed, they began to grumble at the hobbit, blaming him for what had at first so pleased them, for bringing away a cup and stirring up Smaug's wrath so soon. "What else do you suppose a burglar is to do?" asked Bilbo angrily. "I was not engaged to kill dragons. That is a warrior's work. But to steal treasure. I made the best beginning I could. Did you expect me to trot back with the whole horde of Thror on my back? If there is any grumbling to be done, I think I might have a say. You ought to have brought 500 burglars, not one. I'm sure it reflects great credit on your grandfather, but you cannot pretend that you ever made the vast extent of his wealth clear to me. I should want hundreds of years to bring it all up. If I was 50 times as big, as smug, as tame as a rabbit." After that, of course, the dwarfs begged his pardon. "What then do you propose we should do, Mr. Baggins?" asked Thorin politely. "I have no idea at the moment. If you meant about removing the treasure, that obviously depends entirely on some new turn of luck and getting rid of Smog. Getting rid of Dragon is not at all in my line, but I will do my best to think about it. Personally, I have no hopes at all and wish I was safe back at home." "Never mind that for the moment. What are we to do now? Today?" "Well, if you really want my advice, I should say we can do nothing but stay where we are. By day, we can no doubt creep out safely enough to take the air. Perhaps before long, one or two could be chosen to go back to the store by the river and replenish our supplies. But in meanwhile, everyone ought to be well inside the tunnel by night. Now I will make you an offer. I have got my ring and will creep down this very noon. Then, if ever Smug ought to be napping and see that he is up to, perhaps something will turn up. Every worm has his weak spot, as my father used to say, though I am sure it was not from personal experience." Naturally, the dwarfs accepted the offer eagerly. Already they had come to respect little Bilbo. Now he had become the real leader in their adventure. He had begun to have ideas and plans of his own. When midway came, he got ready for another journey. When midday came, he got ready for another journey down into the mountain. He did not like it, of course, but it was not so bad now. He knew more or less what was in front of him. Had he known more about dragons and their wily ways, he might have been more frightened and less hopeful of catching this one napping. The sun was shining when he started, but it was as dark as night in the tunnel. The light from door, almost closed, soon faded as he went down. So silent was his going that smoke on the gentle wind could hardly have surpassed it, and he was inclined to feel a bit proud of himself as he drew near to the lower door. There was only the very faintest glow to be seen. Old Smug is weary and asleep, he thought. He can't see me and he won't hear me. Cheer up, Bilbo. He had forgotten or had never heard about dragons' sense of smell. It is also an awkward fact that they can keep half an eye open watching while they sleep if they are suspicious. Smug certainly looked fast asleep, almost dead and dark, with scarcely a snore more than a whiff of unseen steam, when Bilbo peeped once more from the entrance. He was just about to step out onto the floor when he caught a sudden thin piercing ray of red from under the dropping lid of Smug's left eye. He was only pretending to sleep. He was watching the tunnel entrance. Hurriedly, Bilbo stepped back and blessed the luck of his ring. Then Smug spoke. Then Smug spoke. Well, thief, I smell you and I feel your air. I hear your breath. Come along, help yourself again. There is plenty to spare. But Bilbo was not quite so unlearned in dragon lore as all that, and if Smug hoped to get him to come nearer so easily, he was disappointed. No, thank you, O Smug the Tremendous, he replied. I did not come for presents. I only wish to have a look at you and see if you were truly as great as the tales say. I did not believe them. Do you now? Said Dragon, somewhat flattered, even though he did not believe a word of it. Truly, songs and tales fall utterly short of the reality, O Smug, the chiefest and greatest of calamities, replied Bilbo. You have nice manners for a thief and a liar, said the dragon. You seem familiar with my name, but I don't seem to remember smelling you before. Who are you, and where do you come from, may I ask? You may indeed. I come from under the hill, and under the hills, and over the hills my paths led, and through the air, and I am he that walks unseen. So I can well believe, said Smug, but that is hardly your usual name. I am the clue finder, the web cutter, the stinging fly. I was chosen for the lucky number. Lovely titles, sneered the dragon. But the lucky numbers don't always come off. I am he that buries his friends alive and draws them again from the water. I came from the end of the bag, but no bag went over me. These don't sound so credible, scoffed Smug. I am a friend of bears and guest of eagles. I am a ring winner and luck wearer. I am a barrel rider, went on Bilbo, beginning to be pleased with his riddling. That's better, said Smug. But don't let your imagination run away with you. This is, of course, is the way to talk to dragon if you don't want to reveal your proper name, which is wise, and don't want to infuriate them by a flat refusal, which is also very unwise. No dragon can resist the fascination of riddling talk and of wasting time trying to understand it. There was a lot here which Smog did not understand at all, though I expect you do since you know all about Bilbo's adventures to which he was referring. But he thought he understood enough and he chuckled in his wicked inside. I thought so last night, he smiled to himself. Lakemen, some nasty scheme of those miserable tub trading lakemen, or I am a lizard. I haven't been down that way for age and for an age, but I will soon alter that. Very well, O Barrel Rider, he said aloud. Maybe Barrel was your pony's name, and maybe not, though it was fat enough. You may walk unseen, but you did not walk all the way. Let me tell you, I ate 6 ponies last night, and I shall catch and eat all the others before long. In return for the excellent meal, I will give you one piece of advice for your good. Don't have more to do with dwarfs than you can help. Dwarfs? Said Bilbo in pretended surprise. Don't talk to me, said Smug. I know the smell and taste of dwarf. No one better. Don't tell me that I can eat a dwarf-ridden pony and not know it. You will come to a bad end if you go with such friends. Thief, barrel rider. I don't mind if you go back and tell them so from me. But he did not tell Bilbo that there was one smell he could not make out at all. Hobbit smell. It was quite outside his experience and puzzled him mightily. I suppose you got a fair price for that cup last night? He went on. Come now, did you? Nothing at all? Well, that's just like them. And I suppose they are sulking outside, and your job is to do all the dangerous work and get what you can when I am not looking for them. And you will get a fair share? Don't you believe it? If you can get off alive, you will be lucky. Bilbo was now beginning to feel really uncomfortable. Whenever Smog's roving eye, seeking for him in the shadows, flashed across him, he trembled, and an uncountable desire seized hold of him to rush out and reveal himself and tell all the truth to Smug. In fact, he was in grievous danger of coming under the dragon's spell. But plucking up courage, he spoke again. You don't know everything, O Smug the Mighty, said he. Not gold alone brought us here. Ha ha, you admitted the us, laughed Smug. Why not say us 14 and be done with it? Mr. Lucky Number, I am pleased to hear that you had other business in these parts besides my gold. In that case, you may perhaps not altogether waste your time. I don't know if it has occurred to you that even if you could steal the gold bit by bit, a matter of 100 years or so, you could not get it very far. Not much use on the mountainside, not much use in the forest. Bless me. Had you never thought of that catch? A 14th share, I suppose, or something like it. Those were the terms, huh? But what about delivery? What about cartage? What about armed guards and tolls? And Smug laughed aloud. He had a wicked and wily heart, and knew his guesses were not far out. Though he suspected that the lakemen were at the back of the plans, and that the most of the plunder was meant to stop there in the town by the shore that in his young days had been called Esgarth. You will hardly believe it, but poor Bilbo was really very taken aback. So far, all his thoughts and energies had been concentrated on getting to the mountain and finding the entrance. He had never bothered or wondered how the treasure was to be removed. Certainly never how any part of it that might fall to his share was to be brought back all the way back to Bag End under Hill. Now nasty suspicion began to grow in his mind. Had the dwarfs forgotten this important point too? Or were they laughing in their sleeves at him all the time? That is the effect of dragon talk has on the inexperienced. Bilbo, of course, ought to have been on his guard, but Smug had rather an overwhelming personality. I tell you, he said in an effort to remain loyal to his friends and keep up his end, that gold was only an afterthought with us. We came over the hill and under hill by wave and wind for revenge. Surely, O Smug the unassably wealthy, you must realize that your success has made you some bitter enemies. Then Smug really did laugh, a devastating sound which shook Bilbo to the floor. While far up in the tunnel, the dwarfs huddled together and imagined that the hobbit had come to a sudden and nasty end. Revenge! He snorted. The light of his eyes lit the hall from floor to ceiling like scarlet lightning. Revenge! He snorted, and the light of his eyes lit the hall from floor to ceiling like a scarlet lightning. Revenge! The king under the mountain is dead. And where are his kin that dare seek revenge? Girion, lord of Dell, is dead, and I have eaten his people like a wolf among sheep. And where are his sons that dare approach me? I kill where I wish, and none dare resist. I let low the warriors of old, and their like is not in the world today. Then I was but young and tender. Now I am old and strong, strong, strong. Thief in the shadows, he gloated. My armor is like tenfold shields. My teeth are swords, my claws spears. The shock of my tail is a thunderbolt. My wings a hurricane. My breath death. End of part 1 of chapter 12, Inside Information.